Well, hello there, challengees, and welcome to the Always Better Challenge Show, the show designed to help you take steps today that lead to a better and happier tomorrow. I'm your humble host, Joe Bedford, and let me ask you a question. Have you subscribed to the Always Better Challenge Show? If so, why not? It's free. I'd love it if you did. Please feel free to click the subscribe button below. That way you'll get every show as they come out, or get notified of them at least. You can also do kind of the same thing at our website, which is abetterchallenge.com. You can sign up for our daily motivational emails. Those go out every weekday. They are also free. And you also get a link to the most recent episode of the show. So that's another way to do it. And as I mentioned yesterday, I think I've fallen in love with Stitcher. I've always used iTunes to listen to my podcasts, but I've tried Stitcher out and I'm really liking it. So you can use Stitcher or iTunes or Google Play, or actually you can use FeedBurner. There's lots of ways that you can listen to the podcast version of the show, the audio version of the show. You can actually do that at the website as well. There is a podcast page on the website at abetterchallenge.com. So enough of the housekeeping. Let's move on to our quote of the day / topic introduction. And today's quote comes from one of my personal favorites, huge mentor of mine, the late, great Jim Rohn. Recommend everything he ever did pretty much. He's a great guy, great motivational speaker, and talked about lots of personal development. And his quote is, "Take advantage of every opportunity to practice your communication skills so that when important occasions arise, you will have the gift, the style, the sharpness, the clarity, and the emotions to affect other people." And as always, Jim says it so much better than I could myself. So yes, today the topic of our show is we're going to talk about communication, both verbal and written. We're going to talk about why it's important and how to get better at it. So as far as the benefits of improving your communication skills, well, I guess for me, this has always been one of what I've kind of always thought of as my big three. I always have kind of griped about this, that the three skills that I kind of felt like are probably some of the most important in life were things that I wasn't really taught in school. And those three things are time management, money management, and communication. I think those three skills are, skills that I use every day, and skills that to a large extent I had to hone on my own because they weren't really things that I learned much about in school. I guess some folks I guess your written communication you work on some in school, so that's good. I didn't work on my verbal communication that much. Maybe some did. I know some folks took speech classes and whatnot. That wasn't something that I did. Money management. The only money management I remember, I took, I can't even remember, what was it called? I guess it wasn't called, I guess it was an economics class, like a half a year, my senior year of high school, but I'm sorry, I hate to say this about my teacher, but we didn't really learn anything. Maybe that was my fault. I wasn't the best student in those days either. I had little other things on my mind, shall we say, but, so I didn't learn that, and, time management, I didn't really learn anything about that in school. Just by example, trying to get your homework done on time and that. But anyway, so I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent there. But those have kind of always been my big three that I think are really important skills to have. As I talked about on a previous episode, the episode where I talked about sales, and I presented the idea of how we're all in sales really, because we're all doing sales in one way or another in our daily lives and in our careers. Well, if you agree with that, if you buy that argument that we're all in sales, then obviously you can see why communication is so important, because communication is how you do sales. It's that give and take and that presenting and that conversation and that back and forth. So you have to have good communication skills to be a good salesperson. So in your career, why are good communication skills important? Well, let's see. It's how you get an interview in the first place. It's how once you get the interview, you're going to get the job. It's how once you get the job, you're going to do a good job in handling the interactions that come up. And it's how you're going to advance in your career. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty important. If you don't believe me, according to a 2016 survey by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, the NACE, verbal communication skills are ranked number one among a job candidate's must-have skills and qualities. So I think that pretty much says it all. And then we're not even going into the importance and how valuable good communication skills are in your personal life. How about in your marriage? How about with your kids? Even in your friendships. So very, very important skill to have. So how can we get better at it? Well, before I get into that, I suppose I should say, I kind of touched on briefly already. I think most of what this show is going to be about is it's kind of going to be geared towards the verbal, because I think that's, I don't know why I'm gearing it towards that way, because I had to pick a way, I guess. And I felt like I had more to say about the verbal communication. Written communication, obviously, also very important, and we are going to touch on that, and I'm going to hit some specifics for that. And a lot of what I'm going to say about verbal communication is going to apply to written communication, but maybe some of it won't. So I just want to say that up front. So, how to be a good verbal communicator? Like so many things, I think it begins a little bit maybe with mindset. So I think you want to get yourself in the right mindset for the image, for want of a better word, that you want to project. So think of again, for want of a better way of putting it, an authority mindset. You want to be authoritative in your speech, confident. So you might want to even think about maybe broadcasters, television newscasters. Obviously, they communicate for a living. They've, learned how to do that. They're probably pretty good people to emulate and imitate. So, try to keep that image in mind. Or you could, think of a business leader leading a business presentation or something like that, a CEO, something like that. But I think a broadcaster, I think you could do a lot worse than to emulate a broadcaster. They have a lot of good habits that you're going to want to emulate. A couple of things that I've seen folks do kind of the other way, where they're not sounding like broadcasters. I hear, and I hear guys do it too. I hear women do it. Well, I hear both do it. You don't want to sound like a frat boy or a sorority girl. I don't know how else to put that, but I hear that so often. I see that in the business world. I see that, people who are trying to, supposedly, instill this confidence and authority, and they sound like a frat boy or a sorority girl. I don't know how else to say it. Another common thing that I hear people doing, and it's just a habit, and it's something, first of all, to be aware of, and then being aware of it is the first step to overcoming it. I hear a lot of people who, when they speak, everything they say sounds like a question, because at the end of every sentence, their voice kind of goes up. How does that make you feel when you're listening to that? Does it make you feel like maybe they don't know what they're talking about? Even if they do, because they don't seem to believe that they know what they're talking about, because they're not saying it they're saying it like they're asking a question. I'll never forget Mr. Callis, and I've lost touch with you throughout the years, if somehow you see this. Mr. Callis was my English teacher in, I believe it was 7th grade. And I won the school spelling bee, and I was practicing to be in the regional spelling bee, which I did not win, by the way. And so Mr. Callis was helping me practice. And so he gave me a word to spell. I mean, who knows what it was? Canteen. And I spelled it, and I said Canteen. And Mr. Callis, and you had to, if you could have seen him and heard him, I don't know what his background was. He was an English teacher. He must have studied Shakespeare and all that in college, because he had very much that bearing to him, that very serious. And he gets right up in my face, just like I'm getting up in yours, and he's like, Mr. Bedford, I am not interested in whether you think you spelled the word correctly or not. I want you to say it like you believe it is correct. So that kind of stuck with me, made a big impression on me, and it's such great advice. Sound like you mean it. Sound like you believe it. If you don't sound like you believe what you're saying, who you're saying it to is certainly not going to believe you. Another common mistake that I hear people make is talking way too fast, especially in any sort of a speech or a presentation or anything like that. It's understandable for a lot of reasons. First of all, you're probably nervous, and so just the adrenaline sort of gets you talking fast. And there's just lots of reasons. A lot of people talk fast, I guess, in their conversation. They just naturally, they're just sort of I mean, I'm that way. I'm a high energy person, so I have to be very aware of not talking a mile a minute, and sometimes I probably still do. Another one is that people are just so afraid of silence. They're so afraid that they can't be silent for a minute, that they've got to fill every single second with sound. And the truth is, you really don't. You really don't. And not only do you not have to, but it can be very beneficial to have silence, moments of silence when you're speaking. It lends emphasis to what you're saying. It's a good way to make a point. It adds drama. It makes it easy. It makes it, I think, easier for the people listening to pay attention, where it's not just blah 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 blah. Where you've got some. I mean, like, I know William Shatner. Poor William Shatner gets teased, right, for his dramatic pauses. But it, as funny as it is, it kind of does add that element of drama to it. And he's had a long career, so he's doing something right. So don't fear silence. It can be dramatic, and don't talk too fast. Another one that I guess goes along with maybe not talking too fast, but is also something that you want to practice, is that you want to articulate. You want to speak very clearly. Obviously, if you're speaking more slowly, it is easier to do that, but you really want to articulate your words. It is so easy, we know what we're saying. We don't realize sometimes someone listening is struggling to make out what we're saying. So we want to articulate. I mean, you could almost over-articulate. That's one of the things that, and I'm sort of going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but one of the things that I learned in my radio, I do have a background in radio when I was young, and I think it's good advice. Yeah, I think this is really good advice, actually, is that you kind of almost do want to overdo it a little bit, for want of a better way of putting it. You want to you see me doing it, overemphasize, be a little overly dramatic, really emphasize things even more than you think, because you might think that's going to sound weird and too much and over the top. But really, and I don't know how to explain this, but it's how it's explained to me, is that when there's just a level that's lost in the translation somehow when you're speaking on television or radio or anything like that. And so while you may think it sounds over the top, when it comes through on the other end, it's probably going to sound just right. I mean, there is such a thing as going too far with that, certainly. But you probably want to err on the side of being a little more animated rather than a little bit less. Because again, there's nothing worse than listening to somebody who just talks on and drones on, and their voice never changes, and it puts you to sleep, right? So you probably want to err on the side of being overly animated just a little bit. That wasn't even in my notes, but that's just something that occurred to me as I was talking, and that was, as I say, something that I learned from my radio background. So I said that we would hit on writing a little bit specifically. So obviously all this talk about silence and pauses and not going too fast, that's more verbal. But you can actually use that in writing as well, and it works in a similar way. So don't be afraid of white space on the page. Don't be afraid of bullet points to break things up. Don't be afraid, use plenty of paragraphs. The last thing you want is just this one big droning long block of text that's just going to make somebody's eyes cross. And so that's sort of the written equivalent of the droning speaker that talks on and 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 on. So you can avoid that with writing as well, and that's definitely helpful. Anything you can do to break it up for the eye and make it easier to digest and not look like this big hunk of words is going to be very helpful. This tip could go for verbal and written, and I do try to do this on the show. Now, see, this is the hard thing. Feel for me here doing a show about communication, because gosh knows I'm not perfect. So now y'all can use all my tips and tear apart my show and all the mistakes I make. because I know this is one that I've probably struggled with, and I'm trying to do better with it. But another tip that I learned over the years, when you're presenting something, is sort of the three steps or the three things that you do. I'm going to tell you what I'm about to tell you. Then I'm going to tell you what I'm telling you. And then I'm going to tell you what I just told you. So it's almost like this repetition. And because, again, it helps, we don't learn something necessarily just hearing it once. And we like to have that context as well. So, you give an introduction. Here's what we're going to talk about today. And then you get into your main topic, and then you sum up at the end. So that's a very good technique, as I say, that can be used both in verbal communication and in written communication as well. Another one you want to do is you want to get your important points in first. So do your best to sort of prioritize when you're doing the planning or writing for any sort of presentation, either written or verbal. Get the important points in first, and then support points. You can do this in communication as well. Even an email. It's you might have to explain something, but tell the person right in that first sentence what you actually want them to do as a result of getting the email or reading the email, and then you can give the explanatory stuff. So get the important points in first. Newspaper reporters know that very well. You put the lead in, put the lead up front, put the most important thing up front. And of course, you want to be as concise as you can be. You don't want to, and y'all know that I struggle with this sometimes. You don't want to belabor a point. You want to say it, clearly and concisely, and not drone on and on and on. It makes it easier for the person on the other end to receive the information that you're trying to communicate to them, and where they don't have to sort through all the muck. Another one, and this can be tricky, but do your best to know your audience. Do whatever research or preparation you can to have some understanding of who it is you're talking to, whether it's a person, whether it's a group. Know who they are, know where they're at, and that will help you to craft a message that speaks to them. Not everybody is like you. You can't talk to everybody like you would talk to yourself. So just a little tip to learn as much about them as you possibly can. Here's one. This is the one that y'all are going to pick me apart on. My sister, who watches the show, has already given me some feedback, and I know. See, that's the problem. I know a lot of people. This is something they're not aware of, but from my past life experiences and experiences in different communication, in jobs and whatnot, I'm aware of it. Word whiskers and cliches, and I struggle with both of these myself. So word whiskers, there's lots of them. I just did one. Those are word whiskers. That goes back to what I talked about before, where we're afraid of silence. I'm using the word whiskers to kill time while I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next or how I want to exactly say it. And the point is, you don't really have to do those. It's okay to take a moment and pause. See? It's okay. So being aware of them is the first point. A lot of folks have no idea how much they do that. So a good thing might be to record yourself and play it back, and then you're going to hear every single word whisker that you do. And being aware of it is going to be the first step then to eliminating it. You start catching yourself doing them, and then you can stop doing them. Another one is cliches, and I catch myself doing this on the show. For want of a better way of putting it, I've noticed myself using that cliche. At the end of the day, that one is like the epidemic. I listen to lots of different podcasts and shows, and some people are worse at it than others. Some people, it's like every 30 seconds they're talking. But at the end of the day, so just be aware of phrases like that perhaps you overuse. There's nothing wrong with using phrases like that. They become cliches for a reason because they're quite useful and evocative and whatever. But just it's when you repeat them over and over that, and you may not even be aware of it, but someone listening definitely might pick up on that, and it's like, oh, there he said it again. You know what I'm saying? That's another one. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what? Lots of things like those. So be aware of those. Awareness is the first step, and then that will help you catch yourself and start eliminating those over time. Another tip, we talked about being concise. Another element of that, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, is that you want to use the simplest language possible. First of all, you want to avoid company jargon or industry jargon unless you're very, 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 very certain that everybody who's listening is going to understand that jargon. And if not, you need to explain it, because that's how you're going to lose folks if you're saying things that they just simply do not understand because they're not familiar with that terminology or so be very careful using that. The other thing is, some folks think that, being a good communicator means using big, huge, complicated words. Big, huge, complicated words, perhaps sometimes that is the best word to use. But again, err on the side of the simplest language you can. Bottom line, if a fifth grader can understand what you're saying, that's probably the best message a lot of times, because you're not risking losing anyone. There can be exceptions to that, but when in doubt, err on the side of using simple words and language. Now, this next tip is this is pretty specifically about verbal communication, but this is such an important point, so definitely something that I need to discuss. And that is the element of nonverbal communication when communicating face-to-face. Now, what if I told you that in face-to-face communication, the nonverbal communication, your body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, all those kind of things, what if I told you that those are much more important even than the words that you actually say? Now, I think, just instinctively we might push back on that and say, well, no, yeah, I can understand that it's important, but the actual words, the actual content of what you're saying, surely that's more important than the nonverbal communication. But I can very quickly prove to you that that is incorrect. So how about if I walk up to you and I haven't seen you for a while and I'm like this? Oh, hey. It's great to see you, man. I'm so excited to see you. Oh, it's been too long. Jeez. Seeing you is the highlight of my day. Now, yeah, silly example, but what was most important? The words I was saying or how I was saying them? Well, here's the other way of asking that. What did you believe? Did you believe the words I was saying, or did you believe the story that I was telling with my nonverbal communication? You believed the latter. You didn't believe a single word coming out of my mouth because everything about the way I was saying it contradicted it. So be very aware of your nonverbal communication, your body language, your posture. If you're giving a speech or a presentation where you're standing, you want to stand up straight. You want to look people in the eye directly as much as possible. You want to act like your eyes are the sun and you're trying to give their face a suntan. I can't remember where I picked up that tip, but when you're trying to talk to someone and communicate with someone, you want to give them that kind of attention. I mean, you don't want to be creepy about it, but you want to keep your eyes focused on them so that it's clear that they have your undivided attention. Little things like what you do with your arms, like you want to avoid crossing your arms. That's that's a closed body posture. You want to be open. Gesturing with your hands is fine. You want to make that as natural as you can and not be fidgety about it. But that's a good thing. But be aware of those things. Be aware of the tone of your voice. Another thing is if you're doing something where people can't see you, like on the phone, you want to smile. They can't see it, but they can hear it. You've probably heard that before, but it's great advice. You want to keep that smile on your face. It comes through. Absolutely does. Another thing that you can do, and now this would be more in a conversation type setting, but mirroring the other person, trying to mirror their body language. And I know some folks are going to say, oh, I don't know, that seems kind of artificial or manipulative. But, to me, it's just a natural thing that you can do to put another person at ease. To me, it's a kind thing. It's a nice thing to do. And, they're not maybe consciously going to be aware of it, but subconsciously I think they are, So it's little things, like if they've got their hand up, then you sort of put your hand up and you just sort of, just in a very natural way, sort of mirror their body language. It's a very good technique, I believe. In conversation, and we talked about this in a previous episode, I believe it might have been the one on sales. Just in conversation, in that type of communication, listen more than you speak. Listen, reflect back what they're saying, clarify what they're saying, question what they're saying, make sure that you understand. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think that's great advice in any type of verbal communication. And another great tip for all these tips that I've talked about is practice. Don't be afraid to set aside time to practice. You may feel like, I'm not a very good verbal communicator or a written communicator, but you can improve. You can get better. It's never too late to work to improve and to get better. So practice, practice, practice. Practice really does make perfect. That's true for verbal and for writing. Another thing with writing is things like spelling, punctuation, grammar, the extent of your vocabulary. Those are things that are going to be very helpful in your written communication. And if for whatever reason it didn't quite, get in there during your school years, there's nothing wrong with, as an adult, going back to school, and you've got, resources available to you like never before that you can use to work on those things. So if those are weaknesses for you, I encourage you to work on those and to improve those. That it will help you. The other point I want to make about that, though, before I move on, is I also don't want you to, none of us are perfect communicators. Goodness knows I'm not, and I'm doing a show. I'm not a perfect communicator, but don't let your concern about not being perfect prevent you from sharing your message. I didn't let it stop me. And there's another podcaster that I listen to it did annoy me a little bit at first. I was sort of in my grammar Nazi mode where I was hearing all of the, grammar mistakes and pronunciation mistakes he was making and sort of being a little snotty, which I'm ashamed of. That was wrong of me. But the more I listened to him, and I learned his story. He didn't go to college and actually was in construction for a long time, but has since done some things. Well, and he's an entrepreneur now and has his own business and has worked his way up. And he kind of said the same thing, which is, I know I'm not a great communicator. I know my grammar and my pronunciation are bad, but I feel like I have valuable information to share. And so I share it anyway, and I ask you to do your best to overlook, the flaws in my communication. And I just found that so inspiring, and so that's the thing I want to say to you. Don't let me in the quotes. The quote I love is, think about how, and I'm paraphrasing this, but think about how sad it would be. Think about how quiet the forest would be if the only birds who sang were the ones who could sing the best. So I love that quote. And so don't let your lack of perfect skills keep you from putting your message out there. So resources. I have 3 resources to offer you to help you improve your communication skills. The first one is a huge one. I cannot recommend it enough. It is Toastmasters. Some of you may be familiar with that. You can Google that. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. There are chapters all over the country. It's where you get together weekly, bi-weekly, whenever you want to. The chapters get together and you can go whenever you want to. And everybody gives little speeches, and it's a very supportive environment, an encouraging environment. Everybody helps each other out. You get positive and constructive feedback on your presentations. And it's believe me, it's nothing to be scared of. It's a very intimate, friendly, helpful group, and it's something I've done in the past, and it's actually something, since I started doing the show, I'm like, I should go back and get back into Toastmasters, and so that's something that I'm interested in getting back into myself. I can't remember if there's a cost. If there is, it's minimal, and I can't recommend it enough. I'm not affiliated with them. Another resource is Grammarly. This is a website. It's just one I've heard of. I haven't used it myself. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say I'm perfect with my grammar, but I'm pretty good. But Grammarly is apparently a website that you can use to check your grammar on written communications that you're doing. So it's like a little thing that you can use to check yourself. Another resource that I'm going to list down in the show notes, and I don't know how you pronounce it, udemy.com. And they've got a course. You do have to pay for this. I'm not affiliated with it. I don't get anything from it. And quite honestly, I don't know anything about it. It's just something that I discovered while doing research, because I was like, I wonder what resources are out there for adults who feel like they need a brush up on their spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And so this website I found that I'll link down below is one resource I found. I want to say it said it was $15 for the course. Again, I'm not affiliated with that, but wanted to present that as a hopeful, useful resource. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's show about verbal and written communication. It's important. It's something that you can improve on. And if I had to leave you with one takeaway, it would be to, think about how you sound. You want to sound like a broadcaster or like a leader. You don't want to sound like a frat boy or a sorority girl. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching the Always Better Challenge show. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Please like the video if you liked it. Please comment and tell me what you think. Until next time, I'm your humble host, Joe Bedford, reminding you to go out there and make it happen.